15 people died when a fertilizer storage facility detonated. 12 of them were firefighters and emergency responders who arrived to fight what began as a routine warehouse fire. The document guiding this analysis is the official final investigation report by the U.S. Chemical Safety and Hazard Investigation Board regarding the fire and explosion at Adair Grain Inc., doing business as the West Fertilizer Company.
The aerial aftermath demonstrates the immense scale of destruction in the surrounding Texas community. The detonation was so powerful it registered as a 2.1 magnitude seismic event. The resulting shockwave completely obliterated the industrial facility. It sheared the facades off nearby apartment buildings and decimated adjacent residential structures, public schools, and a nursing home, illustrating a catastrophic failure of industrial containment. The investigative docket is structured into 4 specific phases. First, the April 2013 emergency response. Second, the technical sequence of the chemical detonation. Third, the institutional and regulatory failures. And fourth, the final CSB findings and recommendations. All findings presented rely entirely on the official CSB Final Investigation Report, document number 2013-02-ITX.
Section 1 examines the April 2013 emergency response, establishing the precise timeline of the initial emergency window.
Emergency responders were notified and dispatched following a 911 call made at approximately 7:29 p.m., reporting signs of smoke and fire at the warehouse. Over the following minutes, personnel began arriving at the facility to establish a perimeter and attack the blaze. As recorded on page 106 of the investigation report, the firefighters arrived on scene over a span of about 14 minutes, as recorded on surveillance footage of emergency vehicles en route to the YFC site that night. At 7:51 p.m., approximately 20 minutes after the initial responders arrived, a massive detonation occurred. The uncoordinated dispatches sent personnel directly into an unrecognized blast radius. There was no formal incident command structure established upon arrival, and responding agencies lacked unified communication channels, resulting in a chaotic and ultimately fatal tactical deployment. The executive summary captures this immediate loss on page 13, stating, "The violent detonation fatally injured 12 emergency responders and 3 members of the public."
15 individuals lost their lives. This group consisted of dedicated volunteer firefighters, off-duty emergency personnel who rushed to assist, and innocent bystanders situated dangerously close to the uncontrolled fire. The final investigation report formally dedicates its findings to these individuals on page 3.
The deceased include Morris Bridges, Perry Calvin, Jerry Dane Chapman, Cody Frank Dragoo, Kenneth Harris, Adolph Lander, James Mattis, Judith Ann Monroe, Joseph Pustajewski, Cyrus Adam Reed, Mariano C. Saldivar, Kevin William Sanders, Douglas Snookhouse, Robert Snookhouse, and William Uptmore Jr. Of the responders, 5 served with the West Volunteer Fire Department, 2 from Abbott, 1 from Navarro Mills, an off-duty career captain from the Dallas Fire Rescue Department, an emergency medical technician, and 2 individuals who actively supported the emergency response. One of the deceased volunteer firefighters was also an employee of the West Fertilizer Company.
The casualty impact extended deeply into the community beyond the fatalities. The sheer force of the 2.1 magnitude shockwave caused extensive secondary injuries across the immediate area, including severe lacerations from shattered flying glass, blunt force trauma from airborne debris, and injuries consistent with structural collapse. The true scale of the impact is detailed on page 13, which notes that local hospitals treated more than 260 injured victims, many of whom required hospital admission.
Section 2 analyzes the technical sequence of the disaster and the specific chemical properties housed at the facility. The inventory levels of fertilizer-grade ammonium nitrate, or FGAN, present a critical factor in the detonation scale. Sourced from El Dorado Chemical Company, this material was stockpiled on-site in massive quantities without adequate oversight. Detailing the sheer volume of material, page 16 of the CSB report notes, at the time of the incident, stockpiles of about 40 to 60 tons of FGAN were estimated to be on site, and about 30 tons detonated. The physical environment compounded the hazard exponentially. The FGAN was stored within large, non-sprinklered, combustible wooden bins inside a wood-framed warehouse. The facility entirely lacked fire-resistant construction or automatic suppression systems. As the structural fire grew out of control, it exposed the FGAN to extreme thermal stress. The confinement within the wooden bins allowed pressure to build, triggering a rapid thermal runaway. This specific condition transitioned the ammonium nitrate from a state of decomposition and burning directly into a sudden, catastrophic detonation. The inherently volatile nature of this chemical under severe thermal stress created an impossible scenario for the responding agencies.
Page 128 of the report highlights this exact danger, concluding, although FGAN itself does not burn, the conditions under which AN might detonate when exposed to fire are unpredictable and not clearly understood, and current guidance does not offer consistent advice on how to attempt to guarantee firefighter safety.
Section 3 examines the institutional and regulatory failures that allowed this high-hazard scenario to develop directly adjacent to a populated community.
The investigation identified deeply entrenched systemic gaps in regulatory oversight, hazard awareness, emergency planning, storage practices, and land use planning. Permissive zoning allowed the West Fertilizer Company to operate with massive stockpiles of explosives directly next to vulnerable populations. The blast radius encompassed an apartment complex roughly 400 feet away, the West Rest Haven nursing home situated approximately 600 feet away, and the West Middle School located just 1,200 feet from the epicenter.
The emergency responders arrived completely blind to the true risk. Their situational awareness was anchored to past, minor incidents, fundamentally compromising their tactical approach. Page 128 of the report starkly outlines this tragic misunderstanding. Although the firefighters in West knew of the hazards associated with the tanks of anhydrous ammonia as a result of previous releases, they were not alert to the explosion hazard from the FGAN inside the warehouse.
This total lack of preparation is explicitly cited on page 14. CSB's analysis of the emergency response, found in Section 7, concludes that the West Volunteer Fire Department did not conduct pre-incident planning or response training at WFC, was likely unaware of the potential for FGAN detonation, did not take recommended incident response actions at the fire scene, and did not have appropriate training in hazardous materials response.
Deficiencies at the local level were severely compounded by inadequate national documentation. First responders widely utilized the 2012 Emergency Response Guidebook. For large fires involving massive quantities of ammonium nitrate, the guidebook failed to explicitly mandate immediate withdrawal and massive evacuation radii from the onset. It presented ambiguous options that led responders to mistakenly believe they could safely fight an established warehouse fire heavily loaded with FGAN.
The physical devastation resulting from these compounding failures was immense, with early estimates placing property damage at over $100 million. Summarizing the sheer scale of the tragedy, page 13 concludes, "The WFC explosion is one of the most destructive incidents ever investigated by the U.S. Chemical Safety and Hazard Investigation Board, CSB, as measured by the loss of life among emergency responders and civilians, the many injuries sustained by people both inside and outside the facility fence line, and the extensive damage to residences, schools, and other structures."
Section 4 outlines the CSB findings and recommendations regarding profound regulatory deficiencies at the federal and state levels. The investigation pointed to systemic oversight gaps, stating on page 14, CSB found several shortcomings in federal and state regulations and standards that could reduce the risk of another incident of this type. A critical failure involved the Environmental Protection Agency's Risk Management Program. FGAN was not covered under the EPA's list of regulated substances, allowing an immense explosive hazard to sit unmonitored in a populated area.
Regarding the Occupational Safety and Health Administration's role, page 241 reveals a troubling reality about unutilized standards. Section I of the OSHA Explosives and Blasting Agent Standard 29 CFR 1910.109I was not very well known among those in the fertilizer industry, likely due in part to the fact that 1. Application of the section was unclear, and 2. The section had rarely been used previously to site fertilizer facilities. These process safety management gaps left workers and the community wholly unprotected.
The historical context underscores a decades-long failure to learn. As far back as the 1947 Texas City disaster, which killed hundreds, ammonium nitrate fires have resulted in catastrophic detonations. Perhaps the most sobering finding is found on page 128, which notes, the deaths of the volunteer firefighters and emergency responders in West was not the first time that firefighters have been killed when responding to FGAN-related explosion incidents.
Despite the exhaustive review of the chemical detonation and institutional failures, the exact initial ignition source remains unresolved. Page 15 clarifies, to date, law enforcement has not made a final determination of the cause of the fire and ensuing explosion. The report confirms 3 scenarios remain under consideration by authorities: faulty electrical wiring, a short circuit in an electrical golf cart stored inside, and an intentional act of arson. The U.S. Chemical Safety Board formally demands updated National Fire Protection Association storage standards for ammonium nitrate, mandating non-combustible construction and automatic suppression systems.
The documented institutional failures, unheeded historical warnings, and the total devastation of West Texas present a definitive and sobering record of systemic negligence. Will the tragedy in West be the final warning we ignore?